See, I jinx it. I said that for what it's worth, and I'm gonna jinx it. Probably I last longer before you drop me.
Welcome
Thank you,
back
my
to our
mind.
show,
You
Giancarlos.
should put that on a button.
How
Welcome
how
back to our
long
show.
how long was the pre-show this time?
We
45
almost
minutes,
break. We almost break
50
the
minutes.
record.
Oh, we could have
Almost
kept
break the
it
record.
going, but
But that's a good thing. When a pre-show is so long, means the conversation is good.
I don't know. Maybe we should record it and put it on Patreon or
Man,
something.
that's like a big long foreplay. Is either sex is not good, so you're just entertaining it, or it's gonna be wild.
well, you got to set the backdrop, the mood, get into the groove,
Oh
find the
my
groove.
god!
For all of you listening, you hear a new voice, and I am really, really glad to welcome to our show, Angelus. Welcome. How you doing?
Fantastic.
This guy's
Awesome.
following me around. Every time I record something, he's there lately.
Yeah, so you might be familiar. He is in Radio Chaos. If you listen to it, if you don't, pause it right now. Go to YouTube.
Especially the early episodes where you actually get to see Maxie's face too.
Shh.
Yeah.
Don't scare them away.
So now people have to come to Science Fiction Remnant on YouTube to see Ray. How about that?
Well, that's because when we do the live stream for Radio Chaos at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and I look like hell.
Awesome.
Not that right now is any better, but oh well.
So we're going to talk about a movie today that I'll give you my short thoughts on it before we move on to the first segment. But it's basically 50 Shades of Grey gets an upgrade.
What will you call it? 100 shades or
1,000 Shades
69?
of Grey. Well, it's a little bloody there at points, so I don't know. It might change
50
from
Shades
gray to
version.
crimson. Awesome.
It's a cross between a buddy movie and a slasher film.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the first segment.
Define science fiction remnant.
And I like to start with in this segment with one that I have written down on Twitter. And I'm sure you guys are familiar by now, but if you are new to the show, Define Science Fiction, the segment has been designed to as a way to get ideas and thoughts on what you think our show is all about. So it goes like this: if you have a friend that is a sci-fi lover, just like we all are here, and they have not heard our show before, how would you describe them? Describe us to them. And if you tag us on Twitter, you could be featured in our next episode. So the first one that I have here, I usually just grab one, and in every episode I mention one. But I like to mention Space Castle Podcast, which, by the way, I am a listener. If you haven't, and you like sci-fi, you might want to give them a chance. But I listen to it weekly. And they mentioned on Twitter, and I quote, "Okay, last one. First off, you will always win us over with that fun choice. What a great selection of anything sci-fi related. Love the color in this, and you guys look like a blast to chill with. Gonna add this show to the list of pods and check out is 15 out of 10 Space Castle Pod." And I really, really thank you for that. It just made my day when I read it. It's a blast. What do you guys think?
15 out of 10 is kind of overachieving.
Awesome.
What are they gonna do with the extra 5, anyways?
Yeah, might as well just give it to us, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys want to jump in. If you have any ideas on
Well,
that, or if you want to.
two
And also,
things.
Angelus, feel free if you have one description for us. I know
Yeah, you can be free now, Angelus.
you have plenty. You, I don't know if you guys haven't listened to our previous episodes.
Well,
I
the
know that.
only one that I keep on going to is just because it's the truth sort of thing, and it almost applies to all the other podcasts and streams and whatnot that I've been introduced to through you guys, and that's just like, a bunch of fans discussing stuff that they love rather than wasting energy on things that they hate. And yeah, whether it be um, like an overarching genre like sci-fi, or whether it's something specific like Upgrade, Blade Runner, Alita, I could name drop a billion different sci-fi franchises, and well, obviously I love Alita more than most, but more than all of them actually. But yeah, I still love them all. It's like I love pizza and also love peanut butter jelly sandwiches.
Yeah.
Just I love my pineapple pizza more than most other dishes.
Nice.
To give the listeners a bit of context, this is the Angelus, like the guy who keeps getting mentioned at the start of our show, who's been interacting with us on Twitter. So, in case you were wondering, this is he.
Yes. Yeah, and we are glad to have him finally on our show. We have been talking about this for a long time, but our schedules usually don't align. So I'm really happy that it did for this time. We can have him on the show. Okay, so let me move on to our next segment.
Should I start shouting?
We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is Sci-Fi.
Okay, so just like if you're familiar with this show, you know what this segment is all about. But basically, we have a hashtag called "This is Sci-Fi," and the whole idea for the hashtag is for us to get together. If you're a creator, if you are a fan, we're talking about any creator. You have a podcast, you have a book, you produce games, you make a movie, you made a TV show. It doesn't matter. It's really great to be able to talk under one cloud, if you might. um the reason why we created this at the beginning was because, and Giancarlo's can attest to this, from the very first episode. I got into Twitter, and I find it very hard to talk to the sci-fi community, and it was very hard to find the people that like sci-fi just like we do, so we can have the conversations that we want to have about the topics that we love. So this idea was to just go ahead and use the hashtag this is sci-fi whenever you're posting anything to do, that has anything to do with sci-fi, or if you're following any topics about sci-fi, you can just follow the hashtag and see what other people are talking about. So in that, I'm going to go ahead and mention. I'll start it off and mention just one of the things that I posted that had some track on it. But if you follow the hashtag, you probably have the same thought and experience that we all had. At some point, it becomes overwhelming. But the great thing that I notice is whenever you follow the hashtag, I have heard from other people that it's really great because they are exposed to things they were not normally exposed to, and they have been able to discover things that they have never seen before, and they have new favorites within the sci-fi genre. So one of the things that I did for this week was I tweeted, what is your favorite sci-fi IP? And I got a couple of responses here, and we can all join in. And we have, I like to think that I'm kind of weird in that aspect because
We're proud.
We're and proud. I am a sci-fi lover, so I love all sci-fi.
What about your
Um,
wife's lover?
I'm sorry.
What about your wife's lover? You know your wife's lover?
Well, she's sci-fi too, so you know.
Oh, I see what you did there.
So, you know, like one conversation that I recall having is in the
Smooth.
thread. This is sci-fi. How you have someone's that are fan within a fandom. Like, for example, I can mention the fans of Strange New Worlds
They
within the
blow because
Star
they're
Trek
fans.
fandom. I'm sorry.
They blow because they're fans.
So within Strange New World, you know, Strange New Worlds is a show. It's an amazing show. If you have not seen it, you should watch it. And there's a lot of fans of that show, which is within the Star Trek IP. And I love that show, by the way. But I also love every Star Trek there is. You know, I can easily talk about the original series, like I can talk about Discovery or Lower Decks, which is one of my favorite animations from the IP because we get exposed to what the Lower Decks people do, which is not something that we normally get into Star Trek. However, I love all sci-fi. We can talk about, and of course, there's a couple, and I'll get to that in a minute. There's a few that I haven't gotten to it, so please don't take my sci-fi card away. But
Level 5.
so, DD 9000, D Douglas, I believe, actually mentioned that one. Ray, he mentioned he loves Babylon 5. And yeah, I'm gonna get into it. And we are probably eventually we'll do an episode, you know, the first episode, we'll do an episode on that. We have Jay Hall, the Okie Bookcast, mentioning he loves Star Wars. That I can get behind it. I have watched every Star Wars. Actually, I own every Star Wars anything that has done, except for, you know, some of the movies. I mean, some of the books and some of the um, man comic books. But as far as like audio visual,
You could get
I pretty much
behind
have everything.
it. Ooh.
We have, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. CIAU Kent. It is Stargazer 0118. He mentions that he loves Star Trek. And yep, if you've seen my tweets online, you know my love for Star Trek is big. You know, it goes a lot longer than, well, because there's so much more.
And the more Star Trek he sees, the more it grows. What would it be?
As a matter of fact, I am in the middle of a marathon with my wife. And the reason how that started is I was watching some of the Star Trek shows, and she always had questions as to who is this, what happened there, what was that. So I said, would you like to, like, I can start the whole thing and you could see firsthand and then you can understand if you like. And she said, yeah, why not? So right now we're at season 2 of the original series, but I'm watching everything in timeline, which I have done that in the past multiple times. But this is first time that I have done that I'm doing this with my wife, and she's having fun. Plus, she gets to see things that she had questions on firsthand. So, yep, I appreciate Stargazer 0118 with his comments about Star Trek, and we have our guest last episode. Um, commented on this thread as well, and he mentions a couple. He loves the Orville. I would have to really point out my love for this show, the Orville. It is very close, and I can tell you this personally. To me, the Orville is very close to what I love for Star Trek, and it is not hard to find a Star Trek lover like he is, because he also mentioned Star Trek to love the show, the Orville. And of course, he's mentioning the foundation, which is something that we will eventually get to. And I promise we will do an episode on that.
I've got
You
a
need to
question for
watch
you.
that foundation.
Go ahead, Angelus.
I've got a question for you. And we can keep it short so we don't actually derail. And well, it's sort of part of the segment anyway. But quick question. Basically, who, what, where, when, where, why, how, sort of thing. I want to ask you who is. I already know the answer, but who is Tasha Yar, and what series is she from?
You mentioned that name,
Ask a
and
difficult question, why don't
you. Well, he didn't. You mentioned that name, and I feel like crying. I am very emotional about that name. It's very sentimental to me because, and I'm sure you guys, if you follow this show, you already know we're all about the spoilers. But when she dies, I was not in a very good state of mind.
I thought that when she died, she just stops breathing.
Yeah,
I,
that is the reason.
I
why.
remember on the original TV release when that happened, everybody was up in arms. It's like everybody's favorite character just died. It's like, what? How did you do that to her?
To answer your question, Angelus, she was in the Next Generation. She was a crew of the Enterprise NCC 1701D with Picard as the captain. And
The
after
original
her
security
death,
officer.
I'm sorry?
She was the original security officer in season 1.
Exactly. And after her death is when we get Worf to become the security officer. But that episode is it was, I don't know if it's just me, maybe it's just me, but I got attached to the character, and when that happened, it was just sad. It was really sad for me.
Well, it was they put the rug out from under you because you were expecting her to come back. It's like, oh, she can't be dead because she's like a main character. Oh no, she's dead. She gone. Yeah. She gone off to another series to do something else. Bye.
So is that your thought, Angelus? Like, did you experience the same thing as I did when that happened, or is it just me?
It was quite a few years ago that I saw that one particular episode playing in the background as I was visiting a mate's place. But I basically had was in the same position as your, and I know Giancarlo's probably going to take this the wrong way, but I was in the same position as your wife in asking questions about like what's happening here, what's on the TV, and he basically said, "Oh, isn't it, like this is where Tasha Yar." And I'm saying, "All right, who's that?" What? And I started asking questions. We watched the episode, and then we went to play games again, and yeah, and that's how I knew about it. And while I don't know the Star Trek world, for example, as intimately as I would a Leader or Blade Runner, like you mentioned names, and I'm thinking, all right, like I might know what division they're a part of, or I might know which crew or series that they're from, sort of thing, like minor details. So yeah, maybe permeate is the best word for it, but like Star Trek culture permeates everything.
Yeah.
Or it's prevalent, very prevalent.
Well, there's so much more out there. I know we have a lot of Star Wars, but there's a lot more Star Trek out there. But I do follow both just equally, and I can enter into conversation about any of those IP as well as Galactica. You name it. I love, but there are a few others. Babylon 5 that I am not familiar with, but I will eventually.
For reference, that was episode 22 of season 1 of TNG called Skin of Evil.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to go and look it up and watch it and be as shocked as we were.
So I like to extend, and if you have any experience about following the hashtag This is Sci-Fi, give me what is your thought? What is your experience on the hashtag so far? Any of you can start first. It doesn't matter.
I'll get mine because I'm, despite probably being one of the more younger guys here, especially with Maxi around.
Excuse me, Mr. Young.
I'm roughly the same age as Robert. Thank you very much.
And I am just the guy stuck in the middle.
And here I am stuck in the middle with you. Anyway, but yeah,
Don't give up your
I'm
day job.
prone to forgetting. So I'll go and one of the franchises that I'll mention, mainly because I grew up with it as a kid, and it's like much like, again, I keep name dropping it only because it permeates everything in my life right now. But much like a leader, it's stayed at that high level of I love it sort of thing for so long, and that is Robotech. I grew up with it. I had all the toys. There was this one particular toy of Roy Foker's Veritech fighter, and I accidentally, fortunately enough, I could put it back together again, but I tried taking it apart just to try and transform it.
Whoops.
Hey,
and
I've done that. I've done that in the past with toys too.
and but yeah, I
It was
managed to
called
put it back
Skull
together again.
One, by the way.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like there's so many different versions of it. There's so many different offshoots. Like Macross Plus, the original, the new shows, the One by Harmony Gold, and
Oh, did you hear that Harmony Gold's finally given up the license in Western countries now? So all that Macross stuff that we could never get because Harmony Gold had the license and they wouldn't release it's coming. So there's going to be new Blu-ray releases and all sorts of stuff for the Japanese version of the story rather than the modified Western one.
well, I guess because I grew up with it and it's been a part of me for so long, I didn't mind the Harmony Gold version. But that led me
it
to
has its place for sure.
That led me to seek out all these other versions. Like, what's this crap? It's not Robotech. And then when I watch it, it's like, well, actually, it is Robotech because it's got Zentradi, it's got Veritech fighters, and all this other stuff. And yeah, and it culminates up to me thinking, what the hell? If they can develop a movie like Pacific Rim, why the hell can't they do a live-action Robotech? And I know the stigma that's attached to it right now, and yet again, I'll name drop it because it keeps on coming up. But much like Alita, I think the voodoo has finally been like shaken off, or like that someone's actually developed a recipe or a backdrop, skeleton, a framework on how to do a live action adaptation right. So yeah, it's very much yeah, Robotech would be my one of the few franchises. And an honorable mention, when you were talking about Star Wars earlier, I was going in a bookstore one time and I noticed like all these Star Wars novels, and this one in particular was part of this story of Star Wars of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. And I read the back of the book I read the trailer for the book, and I'm thinking this doesn't make sense, but it sounds good. Yeah, and like I read the first couple of pages, and that's what I traditionally do with books before I decide to buy them or not. And I thought I really like this, so I'll start at the like the first book, and I just kept on buying book after book after book. And just that one invasion in the Star Wars world, it lasted I think about 25 years. No,
It
it was
lasted so
25.
long that they forgot about it.
It was 25 years
It was
after.
decanonized.
Yeah, after the Return of the Jedi, but yeah, and that's like the expanded or expansive universe is of Star Wars is something that I also love. So Robotech and Star Wars in that context.
Just as an
I have a
aside,
mind boggler.
Robotech.
I have a mind boggler for Star Wars lovers. If it took over 25 years for the Jedi to return, did he return or just a new one came? You're returning for something when you're coming back from it, but 25 years to return, man, that's not a return anymore.
That's a
You're
life
coming to a
sentence.
whole new thing.
Oh, that's a walk in the park for James Cameron.
But
True. True.
Oh,
Just a quick
Yeah.
interesting aside about Robotech is that the way it was presented by Harmony Gold, you had the three series, and the story was linked between the three of them. But actually, in Japan, Macross is its own thing. The first season of Robotech is actually a completely different story to those other two, and there's Macross Plus and a number of other series that follow on from that first one, and they're completely divorced from what happens in the second and third series of Robotech. So it's very interesting that they decided to mish all that together and turn it into one story when it was completely unlinked. It was all from the same studio, but they were different stories. They didn't have any connection.
Now, let me ask you: is a macro like something you put on an Excel sheet for the formulas?
No, that's an angry macro. Macross.
So,
Angry was the freaking connection. Jump me again.
and this is exactly what I'm talking about. This conversation, or this mini conversation, because this conversation could take hours, but this mini conversations that we're having is the kind of conversations that we're looking for when you're following This Is SciFi hashtag on Twitter. So, if you follow the conversation and you notice there's nothing currently in that conversation talking about your favorite IP, which at this point I cannot doubt, but if not, just go ahead and ask your question, do your opinions, and use the hashtag so we can all join in and have the conversation.
Don't do your opinions; just give it to us.
Awesome. Anybody else has anything to say about the this is hashtag this is SciFi hashtag before we move on to the next? Okay. So we go in. Gian, you're next.
Shout out.
So,
Are you muted?
and for all of
All
you who are familiar, who are not familiar with this segment, this is what we shout out individuals that have engaged in our conversations, and we have quite a few in our conversation. So, Giancarlos, you have the list. Okay.
Nope.
Let's let me go ahead. I'll take over if you don't mind. I have.
Yeah, it's better. I don't know why. I'll take a snip so you can see, but it started when we were having issues with the audio on my mic that you were
Mhm.
telling me about the mic going on in and on and off.
That's okay.
Sabotage strikes again, hey?
Sabotage? No, man. If we'll be striking, he will be achieving something. I'm not achieving anything here.
Gian's having horrible technical issues at the moment. He keeps dropping out. If you probably can't see the video, but obviously he just disappears every now and again. But the thing is that apparently he had a nickname back in the day, Sabotage, because this happens to him a lot.
Yep. And it's, I mean, the technical issues are going all the way down to my life.
So if you're listening to the show or watching this in YouTube, and you notice that weird sound, well, if you're watching YouTube, you know what's going on because you see his image disappears. But if you're listening to the show and you hear this weird noise, you know it. Giancarlo's just dropped.
It's just me becoming C3PO. Beep boop, beep boop.
So I want to point out a couple of people for the shout outs. We had a real big conversation on This Is SciFi hashtag about lower decks. So I want to point out Imperial Hobbit Productions. He's been shouting out our show and really involved in the conversation and the engagement. We have Adam Lloyd. He's also involved in our conversations and our tweets. We have Manic Pixie Weirdo. If you have not heard her show, I urge you to listen to it. She talks about our relationships with many different things in your life, and she's also a real big supporter of our show. And of course, we have Angelus. We had to bring him over so he can be supported in our show, as well as he's on Twitter. So we thank you very much for your support. You guys have anything else you want to point out before we move on to the next?
I'll give, funnily enough, Jesse at Sudden But link to Sudden But Inevitable, because, yeah, he was like the first sort of, I guess, podcast or stream that I got introduced to through you guys, and yeah, like much of like what I say about Science Fiction Remnant, I can say about those guys, because they're just like a bunch of people that talk about stuff that they love rather than focus on things that they don't love, and yeah, again, much like your shows, or podcasts as it were, that I'd have it listening. Mostly it's the leader one that I keep on repeating at work, like a radio station sort of thing. Whenever they stream, if I'm doing a day shift, for example, I'd have that playing in the background, and unless it was super busy, like if they just like I'd be on live chat on my phone, like I'd be typing away and responding that way, and yeah, like their shows are very much enjoyable. So like while I'm looking forward to seeing more other podcast live streams, etc., I guess they were the first after you guys. So yeah, a bit of a shout out to Jesse.
Yeah, if you haven't not heard that show, it's amazing. This is one of the ones, Southern Bud, and also the show Open Pike Night, that in my regular rotation. So I listen to the episode every week. So if you guys have not listened to those two podcasts, I encourage you to download them. I appeared in those podcasts in a couple of episodes, but just to give you a little introduction, the Open Pipe Night is a Strange New World centric podcast, which is, I really like the design, and his design around your typical comedy club, where you get on the mic and you talk, and then they discuss your opinions. Really, really good show. And if you're not familiar with Strange New Worlds, you are going to get a lot more familiar by listening to that show.
And I mean, I'll tell everybody not to feel bad if you like his girlfriend, because everybody likes Jesse's girl.
And
That's a
Jesse
deep
has
cut.
and Jesse's has a sudden but inevitable. I He has a show. He actually had a couple of seasons. I listened to the entire season on one of my favorites, Firefly. He had Cowboy Bebop, and he is right now doing Death Note, which is our three of the IPs that I love the most. So yeah, that those two podcasts, you should actually, if you're not listening to them right now, do yourself a favor and go ahead and download them. Anything else you want to add?
I think that you got it covered when you tell everybody to do themselves a favor and added it. That's great.
There you go. Okay, so we are going to move on to the next segment.
Does the outer remnant.
Okay, so in the Outer Remnants, the whole idea why we do this, if you like the show, most likely, and you listen to our episode and you're sad and depressed because it's done, and you want more, and you want to hear our voices more frequently, then we provide a way for you to go other places and listen to our voices. So I don't think I have been in any episode this week so
Not
far.
for lack of trying.
Yeah, I do have to point out, I was planning to attend the Radio Chaos, and I had some inconvenience that I couldn't attend. But it was kind of sad to me because it was the birthday of the Queen, and I missed it. So
Ah, dear. How could you?
Yeah, I know.
Terrible.
Bad boy.
What you
Yeah,
get?
that was there it goes. It had to happen, didn't it?
The big
That
bad
was
wolf.
no. He was about to sing "Bad Boys, Bad Boys." What you gonna do?
What you gonna do when they come for you?
That's the one.
Yeah, the connection
We
is like kind of like treating me like he's bullying me, bro. I'm feeling bad.
up and down like the Assyrian bloody empire.
Oh my god, this sword is
To
alive.
quote bro, all
It's
over
falling
Brian.
twice. They must be thinking I'm fighting with a sword outside of the room.
So actually, the comment I made earlier about Angelus following me around is because not only is he my co-host on Radio
Radio
Chaos,
chaos.
but which the Chaos seems to have followed us here, but we had a live stream watch party for Alita Battle Angel the weekend before last.
How can you watch
For
all
Rosa
together if
Salazar's
there's
birthday.
a party?
Well, that was the idea. Yeah, we're going to get Robert in there. And what we do is we all watch the movie. We count it down 3, 2, 1, go. Watch the movie, and we talk about the scenes and what we know about. Like
I just connected
backgrounds
dots.
and hidden stuff. Yeah, you do that.
It's just like when I was starting to do international business and you cannot understand the accents from many places, you just connect the dots. So don't worry, you just keep on going. The connection is good enough. It brings me back in a couple of words. Oh,
So yeah, we had a watch party for that. The topic that was on just yesterday was supporting Alita Battle Angel to push for the sequel in 2022. So we were brainstorming some ideas and got some good ones there for going forward. So we'll be following those up. But also, it was a bit over a week ago now. Angelus and I went on the podcast, Your Next Favorite Movie. I don't know if you know that one, but basically, I think it was Jason is the
4
host
guys
of that
and a
one.
girl.
And he gets people in who are very keen on a particular movie to talk about it and basically drum up interest in that movie with his listeners. So it's sort of an informational podcast on finding a fun new movie to watch. So check that one out, Your Next Favorite Movie, and it'll take a while to drop. It'll be in September, so it's probably about the time that this episode drops for this podcast. The episode that Angelus and I were on for Your Next Favorite Movie podcast will drop about the same time.
Awesome. Okay, so are we ready to do this?
Was born ready.
Are we ready, Giancarlos, to do this? So the movie we're talking about on this episode is Upgrade. It's a 2018 movie.
It's an Australian cyberpunk movie.
Yeah.
You got 50% Australians here today, so
Nice. So
It's more than Native Americans in America.
What I have to point out before Ray goes and reads his, I hope you have the bad translated version of.
I don't actually have. That was a one-off, I think.
We could create one real quick if you use Google Translate. But what I wanted to point out is one of the good things, and Giancarlos can relate to this because we talked about this a lot. I want to point out that this is not one of those movies that I like, but I do appreciate what they do. For example, I like how this movie, when you watch it, especially from the beginning, you're not immediately apparent to the fact that you're watching a sci-fi movie. And they seem to do this whole thing throughout the entire movie where, you are watching a cyberpunk, but you're not really certain that you are watching cyberpunk until the things are pointed out and they're not out there. Like, for example, when you watch a cyberpunk, just to give you an idea, typically you would probably either see or the actual enhancements into the human body. And here it's just, it's not apparent. And I appreciate that, and I really like that because it's one of those few movies that you watch where cyberpunk it's downgraded into our today's world. So you're watching it, it's just like an average every day until you realize, hold on a second, that car drives by itself. So that's one thing that I appreciate about the movie and how they create the ambience where you feel it's just an everyday.
You know the feel I got? I got like you see that feel that you get when I mean you hate the show, but Black Mirror, when you're looking at something futuristic, they don't make it look like it's something like spaceships and like we're in the outer space. No, it looks like it's today's day. So like I felt that adaptation didn't feel alienated to the reality. You
Well, look
know?
at from the beginning, the guy's working his car,
Yeah.
but then you realize later that those cars are not normal.
Yeah.
That's like, but at the beginning, you don't know that. You just,
Hey, I am not normal.
so.
But nobody knows it.
What do you think about that, Angelus? Did you observe that when you were watching this movie? And by the way, for all of you who are listening, the reason why we're doing this movie is because Angelus recommended it. So I seen it before. I actually own a copy, but we just never done an episode on it before. So
Yeah, I have a little bit to add. Upgrade is one of those movies. Like there are other examples, but I've either never seen them or it's been a while since I've watched them, and it just isn't in the back of my head as much as others. But Upgrade is one of those movies that it expands what you think is sci-fi, because when people say the word or the acronym, they think outer space. They think, just space
yeah,
in general. But this is something like completely out of left field. It's still science fiction, and it does so much like what you said, by grounding it in reality or grounding it in elements from reality. And even now we've got I'm pretty sure Elon Musk is like developing a car that drives itself. Certainly
Well,
he's
Google
developed
Drive
standards.
is probably the
well,
future.
if he names it STEM, I'm stepping away.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
But I feel like I had to clarify my comment at the beginning. And Giancarlos, you could probably attest to this, and all of your listeners who have follow us since season 1 will probably attest to this as well. The reason why I say I did not like this movie doesn't mean the movie is bad. Doesn't mean the movie is because I mean
We're
we're
speaking about this in many movies that we reviewed.
Mhm.
yes. I am the type of person that I love sci-fi, but I also love, the how is it that Giancarlos calls it
And they lived happily ever after.
the Disney ending on a movie. And I'm going to say this out because if you don't know by now, the science fiction remnant stands for spoilers. Then you're
Watch,
gonna learn
watch
now.
the show, then listen to the podcast. Don't
You would have
listen
liked
on
it
the way back.
probably. You would have liked it probably if it ends like with him saying like, "I can show you the world."
So in the end of this movie, in my mind, granted, the main character did not technically died, but evil won. And I am one of those people that the Disney ending, I like evil to be defeated at the end of the movie. Now, Giancarlos has a
It
complete different
was
opinion
it
to
was
this.
paralyzed. Like it was odd, like to see it like inhumane already at the end.
And we'll probably talk to this because I'm really curious about that ending and what your opinions are. But I just feel like I had to explain So you don't think the movie?
You
was
don't have
bad.
to explain to me. Like I told you already. Like when you told me, I know why you didn't like it.
I bought the movie because a lot of people mentioned it, and after I watched the movie, I was like, yeah.
I was going to say that another movie that did what Angelus was talking about with the whole, it looks like now, but the technology slightly advanced, was iRobot.
Oh yes.
They spent a lot of time, making it rather than you know
I
how
felt it was
you watch
more
sci-fi and
futuristic.
it's but you watch a lot of sci-fi and it looks really far in the future. There's nothing that
Yes.
looks familiar. But iRobot
You see the
and this show,
transition. You can see the
yeah,
transition in iRobot.
it's transitive. So there's places that would have been built now still there in between the ones that are the buildings that are futuristic. So it's not
Now,
just everything's futuristic. It's
let's
a bit
give
of
the
everything.
credit to the officer that Will Smith played his role. That he hates so much technology that you get to see CD players and stuff like that. If not, we would have seen a transition probably.
Yeah. So I had to say that, and I probably didn't have to mention it if you follow our show since season 1. But if you're new to this show, at least you know my reasoning now.
That's
And
Robert guilt tripping you for not listening to us.
so Ray, I don't know if you want to say
Yeah.
anything else, but I'm sorry I
No,
kind of
it's
took
fine.
on your.
It always happens. I'm used to it. I tried your idea of running Google Translate, and I did it to Chinese and back to English, and it wasn't nearly strange enough. So I went through French, Turkish, Chinese, Japanese, and then back to English. And it still isn't that weird.
That was so complex. I lost your Turkish.
I just can't imagine how they got that one for Alien. That was just
Oh wow,
fantastic.
that was
What I ended up with was grazer technophobia, in which his wife has had a stroke and is paralyzed. But when a millionaire gives him a body chip that restores his maneuverability, he gets his revenge. So it got confused about who had the problem with their body. But other than that, it wasn't too far off. So that hasn't really succeeded as well as I would have liked. But I can give you the actual plot summary.
Go ahead.
Gray Trace, an auto mechanic, lives with his wife Asha, who works for Cobalt, one of the companies contributing to human-computer augmentations. Gray asks Asha to help him return a refurbished car to a client, Aaron Keane, a renowned tech innovator. While visiting his home, Aaron reveals his latest creation, a chip called STEM, that can manage a human's motor functions. Well, actually, it can do just about anything, he said, but that was one thing that it could do. Returning home, Gray and Asha's self-driving car malfunctions and crashes. 4 men kill Asha and shoot Gray in the neck, severing his spinal cord. Gray returns home months later in a wheelchair as a quadriplegic, under the care of his mother, Pamela. Asha's death and the inability of the department of Detective Cortez to identify their attackers causes Gray to sink into depression. After a suicide attempt, he is visited by Aaron, who convinces him to accept a STEM implant. I wonder if Aaron, the name Aaron, was played off of Elon. I'm just. It's got that feeling.
I was kind of thinking about that.
Yeah. Gray regains control of his limbs and Aaron has Gray sign a non-disclosure agreement requiring Gray to pretend he's still paralyzed. While looking through a drone video feed of his wife's murder, Gray hears STEM speaking in his mind. STEM, this is the chip that was implanted in his neck. STEM says it can help Gray get revenge and quickly identifies one of the assailants, Cirque Brantner, from the video. Gray breaks into Cirque's home and finds proof Cirque was upgraded through a secret military experiment, also connecting Cirque to a local bar called Old Bones. Cirque arrives and attacks Gray, but STEM convinces Gray to temporarily give him control of his body, allowing STEM to turn Gray into a lethal, efficient fighting machine, killing Cirque with little effort. Cortez later sees drone footage of Gray's wheelchair approaching Cirque's house, but his paralysis negates him as a suspect. Aaron has tracked Stem's movement and berates Grey for his vigilantism. Grey reveals Stem is speaking to him, which appears to surprise Eron. Eron demands that Grey stop his investigation. Grey proceeds to the old bones and finds Tolan, another of the assailants. Grey allows Stem to torture Tolan and get the name of the assailant's ringleader, Fisk. Leaving the bar, Grey stumbles and Stem informs him that Eron is attempting to shut him down remotely. Stem directs Grey to a nearby hacker, Jamie, who manages to remove Stem's input guard and leaves just as Fisk and a companion arrives. Grey and with Stem's control restored, kills Fisk's companion. Grey returns home only for Pamela to see him walking, forcing him to reveal Stem's existence. Cortez arrives to interrogate them after finding Grey's wheelchair suspiciously abandoned at Old Bones. She leaves after planting a listening device on Grey's jacket. Grey wishes to give up the hunt, but Stem explains that if they do not, then Fisk will track them down and kill them. Stem reveals that the hack now allows it to control Grey's body even without Grey's permission. Stem uses Grey to drive to Fisk, causing an automated car to malfunction and crash into Cortez, who is tailing them. Cortez returns to Grey's home, where Pamela explains Stem. Grey and Stem find Fisk, who reveals that Grey's wife was not the main target. Rather, Fisk was hired to paralyze Grey so he could be implanted. Fisk's own upgrade outpaces Grey's Stem-controlled movements. But when Grey taunts Fisk with the death of Cirque, his brother, Fisk reacts emotionally, allowing Stem to gain the upper hand and kill Fisk. Fisk's phone reveals messages from Eron suggesting he orchestrated all the events. Grey storms into Eron's home, killing all personnel in his path, but is held at gunpoint by Cortez before he can kill Eron. Eron confesses how Stem forced him to do its bidding, having long since come to dominate all aspects of Eron's life in pursuit of the goal of becoming human. Stem kills Eron and attempts to kill Cortez, but Grey fights for control over his own body, managing to shoot himself. Grey wakes up in a hospital room, not paralyzed. Asher explains he has been unconscious for 2 days following their crash. In reality, Grey is still in Eron's home. Stem, now fully in control, explains that Cortez that the psychological strain has finally broken Grey's mind. This is what was Stem's objective all along, as it allows Stem to assume control over Grey's mind and body. Grey's consciousness believes in the idyllic dream state it has found, while Stem kills Cortez and leaves. Evil has won. Rise of the Machines. Dun, 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 dun.
Like you were mentioning in the like the pre-show, or maybe you mentioned it live, I can't remember now. When you said once they call it Stem, that's when you will like just up and
Check
leave.
out.
Check out. It's like when you, or if you call it, what's the other one, which is also sci-fi related, Skynet. If you call AI Skynet, then you're just like, yeah, I'm out.
Nope, 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 nope.
You know,
Get on the Nope train.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you could
It's an
actually
absurd.
stretch the storyline on here, and you could actually easily say that this is the beginning of Skynet.
It's another way that it could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean that thing was seriously dodgy from the very beginning. The moment it started killing people, I'm like, doesn't this have any of those nice little AI? I won't kill humans. I won't, the 3 laws of robotics. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it? Obviously, there's this whole secret testing thing going on that Eron's running because it takes years to get permission to do that sort of thing. But yeah, it all felt very hodgepodge and avant-garde as far as the way the thing was designed, which had me suspect of the thing in the first place. And then when it took over control of another car and rammed into the police officer, I'm like, but hang on, their car malfunctioned and crashed. Okay, I'm seriously suspect about Stem now. I mean, the hints were there all along. So I wasn't overly surprised when it turned out that the chip was the bad guy. But it was a nice little twist. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have to admit, the first time that I saw it, I did not expect it. I I had my suspicions about um, the Aaron, the head of the company, and then I kind of said, okay, well, uh, Fisk. Oh, this is the company that the Wise used to work for because of the conversation that we're having at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Where I was thinking, oh, maybe this guy wanted a promotion and she knows that she's going to get it, so she paid Fisk to kill her. And so that was my train of thought as I saw this movie until the ending, where I thought, okay, so I guess it's the guy. And then it's like, no, it's not the guy. It was the AI that was controlling everything all along. So it actually took me by surprise the very first time that I saw it. Um, I don't know if Giancarlo's, I don't know if he might be having some issues right now. Um, I'm kind of curious to see um, what was your train of thought as you saw the entire movie, Angelus? If you experienced the same thing as I did, or just like Ray, you knew already what was going to happen?
One relief, I guess, that even helps with the immersion is not too far separated from like having like a Game of Thrones sort of like hard reality to it. But I kind of do personally like movies that where either the evil wins or the good guy doesn't, or both. Mainly because it's you expect the good guy to win. You expect there to be a happily ever after, and there isn't. And that's also partially, again, said it before, and I'll keep on saying it. Also, partially the reason why I like Alita, because sometimes things don't go her way. Things she can't save everyone, and in this case, and while we're on the subject, there are so many links you can make to both Alita and Black Lotus that I was just like frothing at the mouth at the parallels you could draw. But
He was. We watched it together last night through Discord, so I was getting his take on it as well.
and yeah, I kind of like how I feel it just adds to the, I guess, reality of it. Even though that something's not real. I mean, even though it's the fiction part of science fiction, you can't help but like your mind's like sort of in a limbo of what's real and what's not. And I mean, it almost mirrors Gray's Trey, whatever his name is. Sorry, I forget
No,
now.
his name is Gray Trace. It's
Gray.
His first name is Gray.
Like his experience of like, is this me or is this STEM sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of like the approach that they take. And I'll finish up by summing up that whether it be in movies, books, or whatever, I don't like plot armor at all, and I felt like this didn't have any.
No. So, Giancarlo's, did you think? I mean, do you have the same opinion as me as you watch this movie? I know. Was this the first time you watched this movie? Okay.
Yes.
So,
By
did
the
you
way,
have?
I'm not using the headphones anymore because they're not working.
Okay. So, did you agree that? I mean, what was your thought process through the entire movie? Was it just like mine, where you didn't see the ending coming, or were you like Ray, where he already saw the clues from the beginning?
Well, I was suspicious. I didn't have it all worked out, but I was definitely sus.
Well,
that chip was so suspect.
Most of you have not played it throughout completely, but I felt some Cyberpunk 2077 vibes in there. Because what's happening on the main story of the show? is the relic is taking over V.
Yeah.
Yep.
Until V, there's no more V, and the relic, which is Keanu Reeves, it's him. Took over him. The only thing is that the other thing has a personality. This thing is just a machine eating you away. Which makes it creepier. It's like shit, it's not like there's gonna be a human in here anymore.
Yeah.
And I
So,
mean, when he's acting like the machine is taking over, like it's creepy because
Oh,
of
yeah.
that.
did you notice the way he was moving once STEM was implanted within the storyline? That he was being very mechanical with his movements.
Yeah,
It was
when
Like
he's feeding the
his arm
information.
wasn't moving straight towards things. It was going in sort of like square sectors.
It-
And when he walked into the place at the end, rather than walking on an angle from the car like a person would just
Come
go
on, man.
going
He
that
was
way.
walking like a
He
Lego,
went
man.
across and then he went down like he was on a grid.
it's interesting that you mentioned that because I really appreciate this about the movie because
Body language
although
and everything.
you can't see or you can't feel what the actor is feeling or while that is going on, his actual expressions, his actual acting in this movie gives you the sense that yeah, he can walk, he can move his arms, but it's not technically him doing it. He's actually sending controls, movement controls to this device that is actually what is actually is moving his arms and his legs. And I really appreciate that in the movie because it made it easy to get in like that we talked about this in many of our episodes before where the immersion, the more immersion you have into sci-fi, the better it is for the experience of the story.
Yeah.
and
The
and watching
narrative
that,
is set more sharply.
yeah, it's kind of like we said in our what was that, our first episode, our second episode of John Carter,
Yeah.
um the original BR. um so I really, when I saw that, it's like,
Now I can go to
wow.
bars. Boom.
It's basically what you're talking about. There's basically a DAC, which is a digital to analog converter, and so it's going from analog to digital, and then from digital back to analog as it jumps that gap that was made in his spine.
And
And I think that the big trick is like, because even when you're watching Iron Man, for example, Jarvis has a personality. This system does not have really a personality. It's just like flat tone, communicative, thought process machine. So
But it's
if
also
they
brutal.
eliminate body language, tone, emotions, they disappear when it's when Cobalt is working on.
well,
Right?
STEM doesn't have um what's the word that I'm looking for? He can't relate. So
There's no
he
emotion. It's
yeah,
absent. It's lacking. Like, do you see emotion when STEM is
no, there's really no
when
there's
STEM
really
is
no
acting?
emotion.
No, and that's a human skill. And actually, whenever I start like you and I start rambling about AI and that they're gonna be better than us and shit. That's the one thing, the milestone that we haven't been able to do is like we cannot recreate that human faculty that is unique and very complex emotion.
I think if there's one thing that AI needs to get first to not only be, helpful or but only to but also to grow is empathy. Once if you get an AI
Logic
that learns empathy, then everything else falls into place.
or
What?
not,
Well, think about it, Ray. What do you?
you can feel empathic for Adolf Hitler. He had a miserable life, but he's
Well,
doing terrible things.
well I,
Paradox.
I like yeah, I like to hear your thoughts on that. I for some reason, if he learns empathy, and only because I'm extremely empathic. And again, that's the reason why I can't watch really sad movies. Or if you listen to our episode on Black Mirror, you understand why my heartbeat was 120 bits per minute.
Yeah, it was disturbing.
If you ever get up to the end of that domestic girlfriend manga that I recommended to you, I want to get your reaction to that. It's not a
If you can hear it before he makes
it's not a bad ending for everybody, but there's certainly some people who have a bad ending. So we'll see how you go with that. But that aside, yeah, I think the writing for this, for the screenplay for this was really well done, because it really felt like STEM was working on multiple levels simultaneously. It obviously had come to sentience and had decided it wanted to have a human body. It's like all these people are running around doing their things. I want to know what that's like. So it came up with this complicated plot to find somebody who was unaugmented, had no technology within them at all, and then it organized these people to go and injure his spine so that he needed something like STEM to get revenge. And then it helped him get revenge, and in doing so broke his brain so it could completely take over his body and then become a human, in inverted commas. But the fact that it can wander around in a human body and do things doesn't make it a human, not even close. It obviously has no morals. It doesn't care who it has to kill to get what it wants. There was a section there when he went into the guy's the first guy he killed's house, and you saw the pictures on the fridge from the kid, from the man's child, and the first thought I had was, oh shit, this guy's got a kid. You can't just go off him because it's going to affect the kid. But STEM had no compunction about wiping the guy off the face of the earth, and the way it was written and the way he was just happy to like kill the guy who created him, kill the police officer, it didn't bother him in the slightest, because he's not a human. He's an artificial life form, and doesn't give a crap. There are no morals in there. It has not been programmed in there. But having said that, there was another level of programming where he was still warning Gray, don't try to resist me or you will break your brain. He warned him about it, and Gray fought back anyway, broke his brain, and then ended up in the simulation where his wife was still alive and was going to live out his days in a happy dream world, while the AI taking over his body was going to go and, rip shit
And
up.
I mean, we've spoken about this on an episode on Ex Machina, I think, too. It's the human condition that we cannot put on a machine. Like, it's the empathy is like empathy and logic not always are gonna meet eye to eye. All the contrary, most of the time they're gonna be at odds.
Well, what I can tell is that the chip was not designed to be an AI. It was designed to be a super calculator, and it achieved sentience by the fact that it could calculate even more variables than a human. And after you get a certain amount of calculation ability, the chance of something becoming sentient is considered to be pretty much an absolute. So this thing wasn't designed to be an AI, a sentient AI, but it became one. And the fact that it wasn't meant to be that meant that all these, there was no programming for a conscience and empathy. It wasn't in there because it wasn't expected to become that. So more than us creating AI and being concerned with what they might become, accidental AI creation, like sentient AI creation, is more the problem, because you haven't prepared the groundwork. You haven't got all that stuff in there that you think something that's sentient should have. And then it's, unfettered. It goes off and does whatever the fuck it wants. And that's the big problem at the end of this movie. This thing has no morals. This thing has no fetters. The last thing that was stopping it was hacked out of it, and it's just going to go off and wreck face wherever it feels like.
I did not caught on to it, but there was something orchestrating what the AI or the STEM had to execute, right? So
what do you mean by, I'm not sure what your statement means.
STEM is not a self-sufficient system that will come up with its own orders on what it needs to do for the rest of the existence.
I think that was what STEM. I think it's like Ray said. STEM kind of just achieve consciousness and just took over.
Yeah.
Out of everything, he was
It's like
controlling everything.
Cortana, but without going cuckoo at 7 years.
And what?
It's like Cortana, but without going cuckoo at 7 years.
Yeah,
Because
and
Cortana does the same thing that Stem does. Like, it warns the guy, like, don't try to trick me, don't try to leave me. I'm gonna screw you over, and you're not gonna realize what happened.
I was thinking about that too, and I think even my wife mentioned, it's just like having Cortana.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, if Cortana was psychotic, but
If Cortana didn't have that short lifespan,
well, actually, I'll take that back. Cortana was, no, I think they just went about it different ways.
but Cortana had a personality from the get go too.
Yes, and she was
That's the
empathic,
thing. This
and
thing
that brings me to my
created like
question.
that.
Like, if you take away sadness and happiness and all that stuff, and you give STEM the ability to be empathic or empathy, do you think that STEM would have been less psychotic, or that is the question that I like to. I think so. I think that eventually having empathy will trigger this learning path where all the other emotions might come into place. But if it is possible, what do you guys think?
It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, STEM had wants. Like we have our basic human want. There's wants and needs. The needs of a human are shelter, food, comfort, and
self-preservation.
But then there's a whole list of wants above that. This is psychology 101. But there's a whole list of wants above that. And STEM had a want. It wanted to be to experience being human. But we don't want to know what other wants it had.
Agent Smith.
Yeah, a bit Agent Smithy. Yeah, definitely
Now,
shades of Agent Smith.
There's a distinction that I want to make of a word that Robert chose. He's saying is being psychotic. To me, STEM is being psychopathic. It lacks emotion. It's not being a crazy, paranoid bitch, He's actually just, he lacks emotion. Like, oh, she's sad. I don't give a shit. It doesn't make my day any better. It doesn't add to it. Move on, and I'll kick it with the puppy.
Angelus, do you agree? I mean, what is your thought? And I asked the question again, where if you can give just empathy, that's it, to STEM, do you think we would have a different STEM, or do we still have the same?
I feel that partially the reason why that it needs, much like a leader, always name dropping her, much like a leader, it needs a sequel, because I feel that the STEM's programming, if you want to call it that, is in its infancy. It hasn't developed because like the more advanced, or like a more evolved, if you want to call it that, upgraded AI explanation that I can give actually comes from a game. Maybe some of you guys have even played it or at least heard of it. But Detroit Becoming Human is almost a classic example of.
We have an episode on it.
We have an episode on it. If you have
Robert
not
and I
listened to it,
binge play that thing, man.
Season 1.
3 days we beat it up.
Yep.
I'll have to. Did you say season 1? Because I have to look that up and listen to it after the show.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The first, I guess, step for STEM to gain empathy is to be able to write its own programming. I guess the reason why it needed to separate itself from, the mother computer, if you want to call it that, sort of thing. So if it writes its own programming, or at least that particular individual chip can write its own programming, then maybe it can account for, almost like flipping a coin, or in this case, a random number generator of how to approach. Because, obviously, how humans react and empathize is almost a chemical reaction, and sometimes those chemicals can be an imbalance. I have no doubt that Maxi might even address this in his the science of science fiction section later on. You guys have that still, don't you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but just as I guess a precursor, yeah, I guess an AI's version of empathy would be like writing its own programming, and how it does that. We could theorize for hours on what it could do. And there's too many examples just to go over, but
Yeah.
if it could write its own program, if we could give it some pseudo empathy, then yeah, Detroit Becoming Human, the androids in that would be a perfect example.
Yeah.
If it's a program, you think it's real empathy?
Well, empathy is based on fear, basically fear of not being liked. Now,
And
I don't think
perception.
STEM
Based on
care.
perception of outer social interactions, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if a person doesn't care about being liked or not, they're not going to have empathy. They're just not going to develop it because they don't need for people to like them. If you fear people not liking you, then you're going to make an effort to be liked. And in making an effort to be liked, you're going to do things that other people appreciate and not do the things that they don't appreciate, like killing them. So I mean, STEM didn't care. STEM didn't want to be liked. Obviously, it was not a thing that was on its radar.
You have to watch another show that plays this topic, Raised by Wolves.
Oh, okay. I haven't watched that yet.
You have to watch it, both of you, Angelus and Ray. You have to watch it because this topic of like AI taking over and having the better upper hand on the preservation of our future or what's best is that topic that has been said for centuries. Is that question logic or emotions? If when you simplify it, that's what it comes to with us and Roberts. It's logic and emotion. You always find that dilemma with them, right? And we see it here too in this movie.
I have to mention, going back to something that Angelus mentioned about we needing a part 2 to this movie to kind of see more.
Yeah.
I wonder if we had a part 2, because we know Gray is still alive inside, his brain. I always wonder, would he realize eventually what's going on and fight back?
The Ghost in the Shell.
Exactly. That's why I was thinking about, because of Ghost in the Shell.
I mentioned you when I finished the movie too. That exact same thing, and I don't know if Angelus or Ray feel the same way. But the way that the movie ended, I didn't feel there was closure to the whole storyline.
No, there wasn't. Definitely not.
This is like shit's just getting started.
Yes,
I felt the same way in movies like The Last Starfighter, where okay, that's one problem, one hurdle that's been overcome. What happens next? And they deliberately leave it open when it's a movie. Like we've discussed this with lots of movie.
The Last Starfighter is like a.
Bye.
Speaking internet, The Last Starfighter is like an infinite array of possibilities. Really. It looks dreamy and it looks like you look forward to it. This thing is like you're at the edge of your seat, like what the heck is gonna happen?
Yeah, exactly.
I always
which is why a good movie maker will make a movie where you want to know what happens next. If you it's comfortable for a movie to end and have you happily ever after and there's no more troubles. But I think a good, I know that's your shtick, Robert. But a good movie maker will make a movie that leaves it open at the end for you to think about, well, what could happen next? And rather than go, okay, that's over, walk away, do something else, you're thinking about it for days.
Yep.
And
Inception,
maybe months, maybe years. Inception. Um, I'm obsessed with this anime series. So
Yeah.
domestic girlfriend. You're always thinking, what the hell happened after that? If you're really invested in the story, invested in the characters, and you're feeling emotions about what's happening to these people, then you want to know what happens next. You can't just leave it alone. You can't go, this is over now. I'm fine. I don't need to think about that anymore. That I draw a line there, and off I wander. But a good storyteller will make you think about it for days, weeks, and months later. And this is one of those stories where you want a sequel. What the hell happens to Gray now? Is this like it for him? What the hell is STEM going to do now? Is it going to try and take over the world? Is it just going to wander around and be a prick? What's going to happen? And that's good storytelling. I
always wonder a real good plot. And you know, you could probably argue with this, Ray, because you have a lot more experience with this than I do. But a good plot for part 2 would be the ultimate battle between Gray and STEM.
Yeah, I just think that Gray being put into a dream world where everything's hunky dory. You remember that those lines from Agent Smith in The Matrix, where he said, "Oh, the original Matrix was, you know, all honey and nectar, and we made everything really nice for the humans so that they'd enjoy themselves and they'd just have a great time because, you know, we were using them for batteries, and we thought, well, we'll just give them a nice time," and they wouldn't accept it. They couldn't accept that everything was going right for them. So then we came up with this Matrix where, you know, everything's a prick and they love it. They just can't get enough of it. They want to struggle. Humanity wants to struggle. If they're not struggling, they don't feel right. And I think that you could look at Gray's situation, and at some point, you know, in a sequel, he would start to doubt his situation in that everything's fine. It just wouldn't feel right with him. You know, and then he might, you know, find a way to break out of that prison in his mind and actually fight back against STEM.
Because, and I always thought also, while I was thinking about that, and you guys let me know what you think. Do you think STEM, number one, is smart enough to notice is going that way to change his programming for this dream? To prevent that from happening.
But I want to hear Angelus.
Hmm?
I feel not, but I want to hear Angelus. I feel STEM is rigid on his form, on his ways.
He'd account for it, but the variable is the will of Gray, because taking a couple steps back here, I believe personally anyway that he knows it's not real because he chooses to stay there, at least for the time being. What's another example? The only example, again, another Alita one, is the Ouroboros chapter, and again, this is something that me and Maxie discussed. Maxie and I, sorry, to get the grammar right. And you know, she would have chosen to stay there, but you know, she knew that it's not real. But because it's a world where Ito is still there, she wanted to stay. Because you know his wife is alive, and he remembers the joy that being with his wife gave him. He chooses to stay there because he knows that the alternative is to go back to reality where his wife is dead.
You feel that he's disconnecting his belief momentarily because he misses his wife way too much. I mean, we know this for a fact because at the beginning of the movie, after the accident, we know how he's trying to kill himself. He can't. He doesn't have the will to live, and now he's presented with this opportunity that, although he knows, or I think he knows that it's not real, he chooses to be in there because he misses her so much.
I think he's on the fence. I think he's not convinced. Like it sounds a little bit too good to be true that everything after the crash was a dream because it felt too real. But you know, when your mind is reeling from the loss of the most important thing in your life, and you're told, "Oh, you didn't lose it. That all that stuff was a dream. You're here right now, and I'm holding your hand, and everything feels real." then it's hard to argue with that, and you don't want to. But over time, I think he will work out, because I don't think that it will be a perfect recreation of reality. I'm sure that STEM won't be focused on it, because STEM will be doing other things that it might, have glitches, and then he will pick it up. So it's a time thing.
Yeah. So based on your comment, this is it's a time thing. We got to see how much of that he's willing to take before he just says, okay, this is enough. It's kind of like when you go to bed, there's a time in the morning when you're like, okay, especially in your day off, I had enough sleep, it's time to wake up. So it's just a matter of time and seeing how much it's too much of this before he starts. I mean, and this is also, just like you said, I feel this is something that will only start once he figures it out, because he's in the fence right now. He's in a period where he's examining what's going on to try to determine what is going on, because he's not 100% sure that it is what he is seeing. And the reason why I brought this question is because STEM, he's basically in control by STEM. So he's inside STEM. So he knows every
Now,
action that he's taking or what he's
does
going
he
to take.
independently? That's what I was trying to ask earlier. Like, does he independently has his day to day?
Bye. I think STEM's hacking you.
Yeah, man.
You might want to do an antivirus check to make sure the STEM is not in there.
Yes, I need to. but that's what I was trying to ask you earlier. Like you were telling me, like, he has his drive and everything. Like, I would doubt the STEM has a drive, like, besides the hard drive. I would think that he doesn't have a will. He has orders. He has a purpose he was created for, and he's fulfilling it, like a machine. Not like, I want this to happen because this and that.
I think differently, and I like to hear Ray's and Angela's opinion on it. I think he just woke up into consciousness. He is like a little kid, way too curious about the thing that he just woke up, and now he wants to experience it from a human's point of view, and hence the reason why he needed Gray's body to become a human.
And
But
he kind of lives blindsided, because that's when it comes that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So what he's experiencing, even if he's a machine, nobody else can live it for him.
well,
Like,
we are the
it's something
product
new.
of our experiences, right, and our surroundings. But our experiences and our surroundings are 100% affected by our senses. And not only this is where it gets even deeper. And Ray, you can jump in after and give me your opinion. But we all have sight, right? So it gets even deeper, because who is to tell me that what I see as red is not really blue to you, but you were taught that since the very beginning? So now we might be seeing two different colors because
I will tell him that he's daltonic, bro.
we are two biological different people.
Yeah.
But because we learned it, we call it like that since the very beginning. That's just sight. We have hearing, we have touch, we had our a sense of flavor. And not only that, our perception is different. How we create how we can get all that information and translate it in our brains. And on top of all that, our emotions play a very important part in deciphering all that information. He is lacking all of that.
Yeah.
So his experience are going to be far off to where what he is thinking he's going to get.
He's trying to conceptualize these things, these faculties of humans that he does not have.
Yeah.
Well, you saw him taste the blood on his finger from the stab wound in the back of the hand. At the very end of the movie, he sits down and looks at the blood and he tastes it. And this is exactly what you're saying. It's all experiential, and he hasn't had those experiences.
That's an emotional. It's called Jack Ripperism. that's
But
part
yeah,
of the psychopathic.
you're entirely right, Robert. Color blindness is a perfect example. People who because of the way their eyes are genetically developed, they can't see the difference between red and green, which is a huge problem for traffic lights in the Western world. But you got to
You
look
can
at
picture with
it
3D glasses.
once there's a differing way of the sensing working, then the whole conceptualization of what is seen is it works differently. And this device not being biological at all and interacting with the biological system that it's taken over, it's going to have to learn all that stuff from scratch. It wasn't. It could see out of Gray's eyes. It said, look at this thing, and I'll work it out, and so forth and so on. But it hasn't had that build up of this is red, this is green, all the stuff that we take for granted after we've learned it. So rather, it's just had it uploaded. It hasn't learned it for itself. So it's going to go around and learn a whole bunch of things about being being in control of a biological organism that you're piggybacking on, because it's not
And
biological.
I also wonder, on top of all that you just said, and everything that I just mentioned, we have the fact that there's a translator device that converts the analog to digital. How much of that information is being lost? Because that device is not designed to
0 1 0
translate.
0 0 1 1 1 2 0 0 0
Well,
0.
yeah, I mean, that device is not designed to analyze the information received by the human body as intended. It has to translate it, right? So how much of that information is being translated or being lost in translation? That's my question. So, I mean, we have all that stuff
That's
and
the
we
right
get all
question.
convoluted.
Nothing
And bottom line is that information needs to be received and analyzed. I don't know. I know we're going into a rabbit hole, but this is the kind of thing that I
No.
was thinking
You
when
actually got me a good question. Have you all guys watched Transcendence?
I think I did.
I have it on my
can't
to watch
remember.
list.
You should watch it because it's the opposite thing. It's a human that end up thinking like a robot, and he loses his humanity, but he's right on what he's doing.
I have seen Chappie where the same sort of thing happens.
Oh yes. It's really that movie was really interesting in that aspect where you have the
it happens in a lot of these movies because that's the best way as humans that we get to assimilate that opposite part of the process, which is learning the things that we were bringing up with as normal things in day to day, you know. But imagine for somebody that doesn't know what an emotion is, like they just don't know it. It's not like they are assholes that they don't know it, you know. So how can you learn something that you have no concept of?
I like to hear Angelus because I know we're talking but I haven't heard your thoughts on that.
Angelo's face is like they don't shut up.
No. I'm more just absorbing it all in. Which part were we discussing of the movie?
The fact
STEM not being empathic.
Well,
and I was putting into doubt, like if STEM does have a will and a drive to go on a day to day, or if it's just whatever in the central is happening that is feeding into him what he has to do.
Well, for me, it all comes back to where a part 2 would have really come in handy.
Yeah.
Because I think I might have touched upon it before, but STEM just needs more time to develop. Like the way that we develop neuron pathways as we're growing from like infant to child to teenager to adult. Like how many range of emotions and reactions and decisions and decision making that we do over time, and being a computer of sorts, or having the processing power of one, how much STEM could learn in such a short space of time, and it just hasn't, like, that particular chip, if you want to put it that way, just hasn't been around as long. So it, it could very well be that it could learn empathy, but it just hasn't been around to do so. Hasn't been around humans long enough to do so, and that sort of shows in the final ending where, like, there was no hesitation at all. There was no sort of stuttering or delay in his actions. He just, like, raised his arm, pulled the trigger in mere seconds,
Mhm.
and the person that he shot, you got the feeling that they would have been, like, saying something to try to convince them not to kill her, but no. In his programming, or not necessarily programming, but in his deduction, I guess, the pros outweighed the cons, and there was really just one way of approaching it.
Yeah. So yeah, I always thought about if he had enough time to. Now
Part
let
two.
me ask this question though. If you have to, if you could give an emotion to STEM, if you're able to, and I'll go ahead and start with Ray, and we move around to Giancarlo's and then Angelus. What emotion you think would give him the most benefit towards human?
Love.
It's tricky because they all interact and feed off each other.
And
One of the
complete.
prime motivators of humanity is fear, concern about what action you're taking, what action those around you are taking, is
Causality.
how it's going to affect you. Without fear, like if you're completely without fear, then you will do whatever you feel like doing with no regard for anybody else because you do not fear the consequences. And that is what STEM is doing. STEM has no fear of consequences. It's quite happy to kill people left, right, and center because it does not value them, because it does not fear repercussions. Most people, like most normal everyday people, and that's another point that I was going to bring up about this movie, that the only people who were actually tracked by the police were the people who were being law abiding anyway, because all the criminals got themselves hacked so they could be tracked. And it's like, what's the point of the thing if it only tracks the people who aren't doing anything?
Yeah.
So the whole system was a bit on the useless side. But going back to STEM, it would need the whole box and dice. You can't get away with just one emotion. It would need to fear, and it would need to desire to be liked. It would need, if a person is lacking any one of those emotions, they're non-functional as a human, basically. The people who do not fear repercussion are the psychopaths, who go off and torture people and kill them because they have no empathy, because they do not fear any repercussion from what they're doing, and they do not feel anything for their victims. You take any one of those emotions out of the picture, and everything else breaks down. It's one of those things that you pull one block out and the whole thing collapses.
And that's the thing, like while we humans need conviction to continue consistently through a path, he doesn't need conviction. Like, this is written for him in stone, right? Like, Stan doesn't need nobody to convince him of what's the right thing to do. Like, he was created knowing.
Well, but yeah,
Exactly.
I kind of think I know where you're coming from. So going back to Ray, so you think that he needs a whole range of emotions, but if you can give him one, you would give him fear.
I think so. He needs a good dose of fear to stop him from just doing anything he damn well pleases.
Giancarlos, what is your thought? Like, if you can give him only one emotion, what you think STEM? What would you give STEM to make him better for humanity? Okay. I guess we can move on to Angelus in the meantime. Giancarlos.
All right. I'll also have a question for Maxi afterwards regarding his answer, but whether you'd call it an emotion or not, self-preservation, because again, a lot of our decisions are made out of because you want to live, you want to survive. You don't want to die, you don't want to get hurt.
But I call that fear, because that's fear of dying, which pushes you to self-preservation.
Okay. I can see that. I can see how that, yeah.
And my question to Maxi is specific to the movie, is did he actually fear the consequences, or did he just, like, in his calculations, that's the word I'm looking for, in his calculations, did he just decide that one action had more pros than the other action, or one action had more cons than the other action? So
do you have a specific action that he made? Because it just generalizing is a little bit hard to come up with a response. Are you talking about a particular thing that it did?
Like one of the actions is when he killed his first victim. If he gets left alive, he'll be able to identify you, or I forget what he said. And also the fact that he was trying to kill him at the same time. But yeah,
there are many ways that you can stop a person without killing them, and STEM employed none of them. So STEM was clearly prepared to kill from the outset, which made me very suspect of that chip.
It was an errand boy.
He was ticking all the suspect boxes.
A stewardess for goals that need to be achieved, deadlines that need to be met. That's what I saw on his modus operandi, how he operates, how he behaves, and how he looks forward to the next task. That's what I saw.
I think Giancarlo explained what I was trying to explain and failed at doing so, because I feel like his answer is my answer as well.
Yeah.
Well, I was surprised when I started talking, but it sort of fit with the whole. No, the chip. But it fit with the whole genre.
you, Giancarlo, you.
I'm surprised when Giancarlo gets here, because he just doesn't matter and disappears. Hi. It's now becoming a meme, isn't it?
He just made it worse when I disconnected. Now you're surprised.
So, Giancarlo, what is your emotion? What emotion you think you would give STEM to make it better for humanity?
To make it better?
Yeah. If you can give him only one, and I understand he needs the whole suit of them, but
damn it, man.
Well, he said it before, didn't he? Love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be laughing my ass out, because that shit is gonna crash in society.
He has. I think he might have a point.
I'll make it a simp. I'll make it a simp.
What would love do? What would love do?
Please.
Can we analyze that for a minute? I mean, I know. Yeah, this is sci-fi.
I'll make it a simp, man. That scene that he's gonna kill the guy, and he's like, "Please don't kill me." Like, okay, I won't kill you. What would you want me to do for you? A milkshake?
All right, you see this rabbit hole right here? Face first.
So, Angelus, what do you think? I mean, I kind of see his point about love, and I'm wondering what do you think? What is your thought? Would that be better than fear?
It'd be on the same plane of existence, in the best way I can explain it. because while fear is like the fear of dying, makes us, fight or flight. Love would makes us to want us to protect something instead. So, like you could say, the love would be the driving force, or the polar opposite driving force of fear, in a really weird sense. I mean, but like I said, it's on the same level in terms, like, I think Maxi might have touched upon it, and he can expand on it after. But like, there's just a lot more that it needs to have.
Yeah.
I guess the trap that, and I know it's not intentional, but a trap that a question like this can sometimes fall into is that it might lead into people thinking an answer of, like, what would be the only one. Now, I guess maybe we should specify that as well. Like, obviously, it won't be the only thing, but what would be the first emotion that you would want it to learn?
Yeah.
Because you need a whole lot more for it to even function correctly, even
Yeah,
as
it's
an AI.
like Ray said, all the emotions play off each other. So you need the whole range of them to function, you know.
Yeah.
But
My
I agree. I mean, love is kind of like the polar opposite to fear.
my feeling is that love is way more complicated than fear. Fear is a basal, like, lizard brain emotion. You fear dying, you fear not getting enough food, you fear all these things, and you fear your boss yelling at you or your partner yelling at you because you've done something they didn't appreciate. But fear is a very basal emotion. It's I think it comes before love. Love is a much higher emotion and a far more complicated emotion. And the other thing that you sort of got to take into account here is that
We can get there.
STEM having emotions in the first place would only be a simulation. They're not true emotions. They would be
Mhm.
simulated. Because of the complexity of emotions and how body and brain interact, it's not just the emotion, it's what effect it has on your body. Because, the whole thing of, when you fall in love, your heart flutters, and your heart, they say your heart skips a beat, and you get all sweaty, and there's a fear component in love, in that your feelings might not
Now
be
you're just describing
determined.
a guy on coke.
That too. But all of the, like it's an example of how all the emotions interact. There's fear in love as well, because you fear, like if you're friends already, you fear losing that friendship. If you get turned down, like, the person mightn't have anything to do with you anymore. There's a whole bunch of interactions socially with emotions. There's a whole bunch of interactions between the brain and the body with emotions, and the chip would not get any of that. So it would only be a simulation
Totally
of
agree.
emotions, and it would be a limited simulation as well.
It does dictate what's the adequate code of conduct, socially speaking, with who's surrounding you or how you're gonna behave. So I totally agree with what you say. It kind of dictates what you have to say in a way, or like tones and stuff like that. Definitely.
It's kind of, you mentioned that, Ray, because that actually leads me to the next question that I had is, to be able to simulate emotions to the level that, and assuming that we can give all the emotions to STEM, right? So we can make them a full member of society.
You're gonna make him a full member.
To give it,
I
yeah,
Viagra.
honorary member, and to give them the level of emotions that would be acceptable to make him like a member of society. What kind of technology do we have? And that is even taking away the fact that he's a sentient being, that with today's technology, I don't think that could be achieved to the point that is displayed in this movie, right?
I think that he's a sentient being, but he's not developed to his finished product. That's where his social skills coming as lacking.
So
It's a thinking thing, but it's not a feeling thing.
exactly. Now, to give him that type of,
That's
to the level.
self-learning on it, I think.
Do you
That's what I'm
agree
thinking, right?
that we might need something to the level of or higher than quantum technology?
And that's the thing, and you and I have spoken about it. Once there's self-learning in these technologies, it's just gonna pick up and leave us behind because it's gonna learn more and more every day, but it's gonna learn to learn.
Oh, that's when he's saying something that you're
Were you
actually
saying
trying to
something,
understand.
Carlos? No, I can't. We can't hear him. I'm sorry. He's having some technical difficulties. But you see where I'm going with that question. It, it's already with today's technology. It's already impossible to have that level of autonomy in a computer program like it's displayed in this movie. So it is a sci-fi movie. We know that it's somewhere in the near future, but to have that in addition to full range of emotions, what do you think the technology could be necessary? I have a feeling that a far off offshoot of quantum computing might be needed for this. And granted, it's not even going to be close because he still need for all the other stuff that we talked about. The interactions with input from the body. But what do you guys think? I mean, me and Giancarlo have talked about quantum computing in previous episodes as well.
Well, I guess humans' fear of Skynet taking over, they'd always think, how can we stay in control? How can we stay in power? How can we be the apex race and not this AI? So like they create fail-safes throughout the wazoo if they need to. Perhaps like the rationale of not playing God. That's quite often a trope that's used in many sci-fi. Might come into play as well. But I just lost my train of thought.
There's been a derailment.
This whole show is a derailment.
I'm catching what Giancarlo's technology has. Yeah, I've completely lost it.
No, that's all right.
Maybe it might give you guys some ideas on how to answer.
Ray, what do you think? I mean, you're probably the most qualified person to answer.
Really? I think we're all people and we've all experienced life and we've all developed emotions. So I don't see myself as being particularly more qualified to respond to these things. Come on. I might have a slightly better vocabulary for it, but that's about it.
So yeah, go ahead.
I think I pretty much covered it with the whole it's a simulation and it's lacking the whole physical component. There's not that interaction between the body and the hormones and the brain, which makes us human. So simulating emotions is fine, but do they really work at the same level? Would they have the same results? We can't know. Angelus said something earlier about STEM, or maybe it was Giancarlo. They said a STEM needed to be self-modifying, had to write its own code, and really it would have to, because otherwise it couldn't change. It could learn, but the learning needs to then affect the functioning for it to have any appreciable difference. The code would have to change in some fashion, much like the way our thinking changes as we grow older. We gain wisdom, and it's not just knowledge. Wisdom isn't just knowledge, it's how it impacts on our brains and how our brains change and the way we think changes over time. And for STEM to grow in any functional form, besides getting more knowledgeable, it would have to be able to modify its coding to some extent.
Yeah, I don't think they really went and explained this, we can kind of assume based off what we have seen in the show. But this computer program, this AI program, achieves
Let me turn this up 'cause I
sentience.
can't hear you.
So I wonder if he already has the capacity to alter his code in order to achieve that that level of, you know.
Well, he might now. It kind of felt like he didn't when he had to be hacked. Now, I have a bone to pick with the script writer because there's actually a rather large plot hole. Once you discover that the whole thing was orchestrated by STEM in the first place, is that if you're in control of the situation, if you hired these goons to do the thing in the first place, why would you have them hunting you down and threatening to off you? I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you put yourself and the life form you're piggybacking on in mortal danger. And if he was in control, why was the other guy able to shut him down? Shouldn't have been able to if STEM was in control. So
I never really
was that all faked? Was that just a fake out? Were those guys still under the employ of
I was on a
STEM
direct
through?
but like
We can hear you.
Well, you can see
We can
these
hear
are.
you. We can
So
hear you. Can you hear us?
we can hear Giancarlo's, but
Yeah, I don't think you can hear us.
so you have another point there. I mean, is he faking it? Would that make a lot more sense for the plot hole? Because yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if he was already controlling Aaron, why didn't he just turn him off?
Yeah.
So
well, it's a lovely little cascade of twists in that you think you think it's somebody else, then you think it's the company that the wife worked for, then you find out that then you think it's Aaron, and then you find out it's actually the chip that's been riding him the whole time.
And this thing edge, so I'm gonna try to go.
But the whole section where he's being shut down and he's being hunted down by the people he'd employed to damage this guy in the first place, so he'd be able to get implanted in him. It just doesn't track because you're looking at the if the chip has some sort of survival mechanism, like wanting to protect itself, having dangerous people hunt it down and putting its host in such a vulnerable position on the floor like that, unable to move while it's rebooting. I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for something. If the chip is in control, it shouldn't have put itself in danger. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I you got me thinking. Now I'm like really thinking in the fact that if he was faking it as a matter of control, but the thing is that, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because I was thinking, okay, what did the hacker did? The hacker obviously found what it was told that it was there to remove it. Yeah. But then I have the thought of, okay, if it was fake, he could have just implanted it there so the hacker can find it. Yep. So it makes me wonder. I mean, I know there's not enough information in this movie to kind of make an actual smart answer to this, but it makes you wonder if he actually did faked it and it was just a way that he found most efficient to achieve the goals that he wanted to do, to eventually take control of Gray's body.
Well, it sounded like STEM wanted to get rid of all the accomplices / people who knew what was going on, and wiping out the people he'd used in the supposed robbery in the first place was part of his plan. But the way he was going about it seemed overly convoluted if he was actually in control all the time. and this whole, Aaron trying to shut him down remotely just doesn't track if he was in control in the first place. If you get what I mean. If the chip was in control, Aaron shouldn't have been trying to shut him down because he was in control of Aaron all the time. It didn't make a whole lot of sense in a logical standpoint. And we've sort of ascertained that the chip was doing everything super logically, but with no morality or emotions or care about any of these biological organisms, except for Gray, because he needed him. And that was it.
Yeah.
The signs of a good sci-fi is when you can talk for hours and it just raises more and more questions as you go along.
Oh yeah. I would have to add to this. It's completely unrelated to what we were just talking about, but this movie was gory. Not as gory as others, obviously, but it was gory enough for me. I typically don't watch gory films, and I watched this. This was really gory. So if you guys have not seen this movie, just this is kind of like a warning. If you don't like gory stuff, however, don't let that determine if you should or should not watch this movie.
Well, it was rated R, I think. So
yeah, it's it I don't like gory. I usually avoid watching anything that is gory.
Don't like gory, don't like unhappy endings.
But if it's sci-fi, example of this is I don't like horror movies, but I love Alien. So just add a little dash of sci-fi, and it's good enough for me to watch.
Just don't watch Bambi, okay? That will wreck you.
Bambi? Well, Bambi's not sci-fi, so I'm not.
Cybernetic deer. There you go. That'll make it sci-fi. Yeah. I actually, well, the goriness is part of the cyberpunk sort of ethos, in that
yes,
these people were having implants put into their body, especially those arm guns. They were really quite interesting. The implanted weaponry in people's arms. That is peak cyberpunk, having implanted weaponry.
It's a good thing you mentioned that, because yes, that is in every cyberpunk property, that I can remember. There's a level of gore, at different stages. Like, for example, I don't think there's enough gore in, say, the first Blade Runner movie, but it was there and it was apparent.
I have a comment about that. No,
but then we have. I'm sorry.
He's gone again.
Oh, but then we have. Giancarlos is a visitor for this episode. Then we have, TV shows like Alter Carbon. So yeah, I think because of the nature, and you guys can let me know your opinions on this, but because of the nature of cyberpunk, gore is inherent, because it's cyberpunk. You're altering your body, and in this particular universe, regardless of which one you go for, the human body has no value. So because the human body has no value, in my personal opinion, you can't escape gore, because there's no human value. There's no human body. There's no value to the human body. What do you guys think? I mean, am I oversimplifying cyberpunk, or do you think that there's some sort of truth to that?
Oh, I'd have to think about that one just a little bit longer. Like I've got something developing in my head at the moment, but I'm just trying to find a way to even put it into words, let alone words that will make sense.
Well, there's an interesting thing in most of the cyberpunk role-playing games, in that the more technology you implant in the body, the more of your humanity you lose. So you become more like a machine. And certainly in the game that I used to run way back when in the 90s called Shadowrun, which was a mishmash of cyberpunk and fantasy tropes like in future time. It's a lot of fun, but it's very complicated because you've got so many different things happening simultaneously. But the upshot of the sort of downside of implanting cyberware into your body was that you had what's called an essence rating, and it went down the more cyberware you put into your body, to the point where you lose empathy. You'd stop being empathic. You'd be more like a machine than a person. And if you went too far and it got to 0, then your character would be taken off you by the GM, and you'd no longer be a playable character because you're basically a machine now. So that whole idea of losing your humanity along with as you add machinery to your body is quite a strong trope within the cyberpunk genre. But this is kind of almost the reverse, in that you've got a piece of machinery which seems, at least on the surface, to be trying to become more human. It certainly wants to experience what it's like to have a human body. But can it really experience something that is purely biological when it's not? And that's one of the big questions. And what will it do with it? And will it develop emotions and other things that humans lug around like a whole bunch of baggage when it doesn't necessarily need it? It's not inherent within its makeup. So, like Angelus said, you can discuss this for hours. And it poses more questions than it really answers.
Yeah. Giancarlos, are you back? No, I guess he's not back.
No sound.
What was the question again?
Well, I was just kind of wondering, what you guys thought about I like to call oversimplification of cyberpunk and how it relates to gore.
I think again, coming from a different angle and using Alita as an example, the way that they kept it PG and still put it there. Gore would be inherent, as you put it, based on what Maxi said of having less value on the human body, not the human psyche itself, but just the flesh, because it can be replaced by steel or machine.
Mm-hmm.
Once you fall into that trap, it's like it just becomes habit. It just becomes like breathing. Like, oh wow, I lost a foot. Well, it can be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get some psycho humans that like choose to cut their own arm off so they can get a better, no pun intended, upgrade. That was legit not intended, the only one. But like they'll choose to mutilate themselves. Like we already see this in humanity, and when people like get tattoos or piercings. But I'm not just talking about basic ones. I'm talking about where they go way overboard and they like file down their teeth or something. I don't know.
Body mods.
Body mods.
Oh yeah, body modifications. Yeah.
Yeah, and people would, lop their own arm off. Obviously, they wouldn't like get rid of their own heart just to replace it with something better, for example. But I mean, they'll probably have less compunctions of losing an arm because they can get a replacement. And it's not like a heart transplant where you have to find the right donor, you have to find the right size, or I don't know the case. Maybe that's where my limit of knowledge ends. But yeah, gore is definitely inherent in cyberpunk because of that body modification.
It's
in
an
this case
interesting.
specifically,
It's an interesting point that you raise about chopping bits off and replacing them. In that technology in 2022, where we are now, is such that there's a huge expense and it's not really well tested to do these sorts of things. But as the technology improves and it becomes more mainstream and it costs less, once you get to the point where people can basically afford to do this without taking out a massive loan, then the sort of inhibitions of doing this sort of thing will be gone, and then it comes down to personal choice. And if you're not too fussed about your biological bits, replacing them won't bother you one bit. And if the replacements are functionally equivalent or better, then people may even feel that it's a necessity rather than an option to do these sorts of things. And yeah, as the value of your biological components decreases because you can have artificial ones replace them and it's not a big deal, then in your mind, the value of your biology and therefore the value of your biological components will drop to the point where you're not fussed about what happens to them. So you put yourself in mortal danger knowing that, I can just get it replaced. It doesn't cost that much. It's not a big problem. So, there could be a whole paradigm shift in the way you think about your body. And then if these sorts of things are happening, then gore is inherent, because if you're busting open your biology on a regular basis, there is going to be blood and guts and gore and stuff. Just, it's going to be there. And of course, if you're replacing your body components with something that's stronger, made of metal or carbon fiber or what have you, and then you're coming into contact with people who aren't augmented, they're going to get pop like little balloons, aren't they? There's going to be plenty of gore involved there, as you kind of saw in some of those fights in this movie, where like some of the scenes were completely brutal. When he walks down the stairs at the end and the guys are standing there with their guns out and he doesn't even look up at them. He's looking at the floor and just goes bang, bang, and they're dead.
Yeah.
That's brutal and gory. When the commander of the ex-military guys spots the security coming up in the elevator and he uses his cybernetics to see through the wall and just gets his gun arm up and goes bang, bang, and kills them through the wall of the elevator shaft and the elevator, and the doors open and they're there and pulls blood. It's pretty freaking brutal. They never stood a chance.
What about when at the beginning when he walks into this guy's house? That you were talking about this before. The guy had kids. That death scene was really, really gory.
Yeah,
where he got I can't even really discuss it because it's.
When he was questioning.
It was gory on a different level as well, because it was gory on a social level in that, this is somebody's father. Even if he's a scumbag, he's still got kids who are going to miss him and all this sort of stuff. So that's a whole nother level that STEM wouldn't give a crap about, because he doesn't get that, because he doesn't have that. It's not part of his makeup. He's not a human. So I call him he, but it's it.
And it's interesting to see the battle, even from that very beginning, where Gray doesn't want none of that. And he's even telling the guy, please don't stand up, because he knows what STEM is going to do. And he's just battling. It's like, and he threw up. It's like, I just killed a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was excellent writing in that it was showing, not telling, the difference between the way STEM was thinking and the way the human it was writing was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of set the scene for the rest of the movie, in that STEM would just, go on a murder spree, torture people, kill them, to get information that it already had.
Yeah.
Maxie, you just said compared to the human that was riding him. Where have I heard that before?
No, the human it was riding.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody in Salem is riding him.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Oh yeah, I mean, and it's the same with Stargate. The Goa'uld would ride the humans and take over their bodies and stuff like that. It's body horror. It's actually quite creepy. One of the greatest fears of people is losing control of your body, having something else take it over. That's why it's quite prevalent. The body horror is quite prevalent in.
I guess
The Thing, Alien, lots of different ways that your body can be taken over. Chip in your neck.
The thing this movie does well, to sum up, I guess, is when he was torturing that guy for information. He said, like, he's got to make some decisions. He said, I can't do that. Like, I just can't, because I just can't cut into flesh like it was a cake. And Stem goes, well, you can look away if you want. I'll do it for you. And I guess it's our own. Same with the gore question. Gore is inherent, but the writer can choose to have it in there or not have it in there based on whether the character will look away, so to speak.
Well,
Yeah.
the basis of empathy is you imagine it happening to you and you go, oh, that's terrible, so why should I do it to somebody else? Because I'm imagining what it would be like to happen to me. STEM does not have a face. STEM is a chip. So there's no empathy there because it can't imagine what it would be like because they don't exist in that format. So that's why STEM has no empathy.
Yeah. And going back to the, it's kind of like what we're talking about, but going back to the topic of, gore and cyberpunk, you mentioned Alita, and that's something that I have to mention. If you are listening to the show and you only seen the movie, you probably looking at me and wondering, what are you talking about? I didn't see, I don't technically saw gore in Alita, but if you go back to the origin story, the manga and all this stuff, you realize it's really, really gory. So it's, that goes back. Then you would understand what I'm saying. Cyberpunk and gore go side by side. Just because you saw it on one version of a story doesn't mean it's not technically there. It just means that whoever decided to tell the story figure out a way to omit it from the story. But even at that, it's actually implied because even with the Alita movie, we see how, she dismembers, people, and especially look at that scene on Rollerball. So it's
I
just
have
that
an
we didn't
observation about that, and I'm glad that you stay on that topic until I was able to come back to the connection.
Mhm.
But I think what it does is, as technology advances, it shows how we as humans lose that humanity and our sensibility.
Yeah.
That's why the gore comes in naturally, and doesn't matter what movie, what show, what cartoon you're seeing, that happens like naturally, and it's that to me. It's like we care less. Things are easier to get. Everybody's rich now. It's not like you have to have a lot of money to get those arms. Anybody can get it now. You can be whoever you want. Which, when parents sell that to their kids, they're not very good.
And I
I'm
want
sarcastic.
to. Ray, did you know that
Whoever you want, man.
did you know that I had an elephant in the room when I was watching this movie?
Oh man, how did you get it in there?
I watched it with Angelus, not you, so I don't have a clue what it was in the room.
I had an elephant in the room when I was watching this movie. The name STEM. Anybody?
Oh yes, that was bugging the hell out of me too.
The entire movie. The entire movie.
I was like, every time they said his name, I was like. If listeners don't know, STEM is actually an acronym in science for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it's used a lot in teaching, which I used to be involved in. So yeah, it's one of those things. I hear STEM and I'm like, no. No.
It had to be. I would be really surprised, really surprised if it wasn't chosen intentionally for the script, for the story, for the movie.
To piss us off, yeah.
What do you guys thought? I mean, did it call your attention when you were watching, or you never really thought about it?
I thought about it, but I thought it was more related to like the stem cells.
Oh,
so that a human could be controlled to that molecular level, you would call it.
Mm-hmm. Did you
So that's
caught
what I
on
thought
that,
when I said.
Angelus? Did you caught on that, or wasn't something that really? It kind of like slightly not really bothered me. It was just there through the entire movie.
I guess technically it's sci-fi from a technological point of view, but no, I didn't catch on it mainly because of another movie called Stealth. Its AI was
Mhm.
called Electronic Deep Invasion or something like that, or EDI. And then as humans, we just call it Eddie.
I see.
Or then there's Mass Effect called Edie or something like that. And for me, I just thought it was just another acronym that we just as humans sort of just put it into a word that we can call it or treat that acronym as such, like treat it as a word instead of letters of a much larger
That is a tomato.
name.
For all we know, it could have been an acronym for something else.
Yeah.
It's just
I got the cop.
it was just too on point for me, when I was watching the movie.
I mean,
So
yeah, so you could say it stemmed from the general sciences. Okay. Had to fit in that
I
one in
guess
there
I guess that
somehow.
was the upgrade from your last dad joke.
Yes.
So all the listeners just got upgraded. Oh wow. Um any final
Well, thoughts? Happy endings.
Yeah, my final thought is there was no happy ending. Evil won.
Oh, you
I'm not
didn't get
happy.
my reference.
Well,
But is it really evil? I
I
mean,
was
it's
trying to guide the conversation away from your meaning, Giancarlos.
Come on,
good
man!
luck.
Don't be so overload this.
I guess my final thoughts would be, and again, it just goes to the quality of story that sci-fi can produce
Mhm.
when it can take the same trope and just create so many different stories from it.
Yeah.
Like we talk about AI, and like how many examples do we have that in sci-fi now? We've got Terminator, we've got Detroit Becoming Human, we've like Blade Runner. There's just so many different examples, so many different stories, so many different versions and variations, and Upgrade is just another example of that. I mean, like if you like sci-fi in general, if you like any specific part of sci-fi that this might seem to have from your point of view, then definitely go give it a shot. At least, like Robert said, like there's quite a few aspects that he doesn't like about movies in general, but because you put a dash of sci-fi on it, he watched it because he loves sci-fi, and yeah, it just blows me away that hashtag this is sci-fi because that's the beauty of it.
It's what Robert always says too. Robert says that it always becomes a telltale most of the time of the future we are venturing into with the technologies that we are playing with.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the beginning. Like that's what I like about this movie is that it doesn't show us what happens when AI reaches singularity. It shows us what happens when it starts working towards singularity.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this movie, what I like the most about this movie is a fresh take in the cyberpunk genre.
Yeah,
It's
most
not
definitely.
something that and I don't know if you guys, because you probably have seen something else out there, but I'm even now thinking
Oh, so this chick
on
area.
every other cyberpunk story that I have seen before, and I don't think there's anything out there that tells a cyberpunk story like this movie does.
Yep, that's
It's
what I
very
like about
unique.
indie films is that most of the time you're gonna see one thing that you never seen that flavor before.
Mhm.
Always.
What I like about it is that it's a story of loss and revenge, but it's got a whole new bent on it. You take a classic story. I mean, you probably could just go look on a streaming service and find a Western that was made in the 50s, which has basically the same plot.
To me, that Lost and Revenge, I got it, but then I felt like the guy that was supposed to revenge, they chop his arms and legs and throw him in the ocean.
Well, that's the different take on it. It had a whole nother level running in there, and it was the twists that I mean, that's what makes sci-fi exciting: the twists, the differences, the fact that you can have a story that has been told 100 times, like in police dramas, in westerns, in buddy cop movies, in all these sorts of different genres, and you can then tell it again with different twists in a cyberpunk / sci-fi format. And that's the brilliance of it, that you can make something old new again and make it even more interesting with this other level. And one last other thing I wanted to mention was the budget for this movie was, have a guess. If you don't know, don't say, but if you don't know, have a guess how much you think this movie cost to make.
55 million.
Sounds like a fair guess. Anybody else?
Less than 10 millions.
I'm with Angelus. Anywhere from 50 to 60, maybe.
I mean,
okay. Giancarlo was closest, and he still wasn't very close. This was this was Cameron's pocket change. All right, James Cameron's pocket change could have funded this movie. $3 million.
Space Sweeper, man. Space Sweeper was not an outrageous thing, but it was quality top. And this movie too.
It didn't get a lot. I don't think it got a lot of screens. It was no big budget release, but it made $17 million at the box office, which on a $3 million budget, even if it cost $3 million to promote it, that's still pretty good going.
It was it was a profit.
And given that they only spent $3 million on it, which is like lunch on a Cameron movie, you've got to think that they did a fantastic job with the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at other movies that are a bit like this, like Johnny Mnemonic, and they spent way more on that. It was way cheesier than this movie. They did a really good job with this movie. I was really
not to lose his mind.
It sounds like Rodriguez's forte.
Oh yeah, it's
like making something out of nothing.
Indeed.
Well, this, and I have to say this would speak towards the quality of this movie. Okay, if I say that if they make a part 2, I would watch it, that has to speak volumes to that, because I might not necessarily watch this movie again, but if they make a part 2 to this, I would definitely watch it, because I am, just like Ray says, I am on the point where, and I'm sure to some point, Angelus, that I want to know what happens next. I have way too many questions, and I would love it for part 2 to be the ultimate battle between Gray and Stem. That's my thought. So, Angelus, I want to say what you mentioned, but I think it would come better from, he has a quote, and I think it's on point. It's on chat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when we were talking about like tropes and how many different ways we can tell the same story, science fiction might still have the fiction part of it, but how often do we as humans have like this strong innate desire of making our dreams come true? And when Giancarlo mentioned that like it's like a glimpse into the future we're heading towards, that's what triggered that that way of thinking, that sensation, because like in a way, if we like what we're dreaming about, we want it to make it come true. And that's the science fiction. If the science fiction is like cybernetics that, yes, it can be taken advantage of, but if it's cybernetics that that improve the quality of life, especially for people that have legitimately lost their limbs for whatever reason, then we do try to make that come true. And then like the first stage would be thinking about it, dreaming it, picturing it, realizing it, and then discovering how can I actually make that real with what technology we have available, or what technology do I have to develop to make that
exactly. But it's a question of is life imitating art, or is art imitating life?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got that whole chicken and egg thing going, where when I look at for the next segment, which we're approaching at high speed, when you're looking at stuff that was 20, 30 years ago, sci-fi 20, 30 years, you can go, okay, I can see things that were in here that developed into these things we have now, or things that we're working on now. But this movie is only a few years old. So rather than it being ideas that were then brought forward into science, you can see it leveraging off current science and just trying to push it just that little bit further forward into a world that feels a lot like our own, but it's got those technological advances we haven't seen yet, and it's got that little taste of the future, and that's often more enticing than developing stuff from ideas that were back in the 60s and 70s. It's that, oh, this feels like next week sometime, or next year sometime. We're almost there. It's just so close. I could reach out and touch it. And that's that sort of predictive sci-fi that's really enjoyable.
Yeah.
That's an extra element.
Yeah.
And that's why we love sci-fi. This is sci-fi.
I'm just not getting a chip called STEM in my neck. It's not happening.
So, okay, so there you have it. Those are our final thoughts. And now we can move on to the next segment.
The science in sci-fi.
Yeah, I kind of shot myself in the foot with that last comment that I made before, because that's basically was going to be my entry comment into this section, but it's already said, so it's already out there. Yeah, this hasn't had enough time to percolate, so that it could possibly be influencing where the technology is going. But it's more a case of when it's this new, it's looking at what is here and just trying to push it that little bit further to make it feel like the day after tomorrow sort of thing. So there's a heap of technologies you see in this movie which are being developed or in their early stages right now. The Neuralink chip is the obvious one, which the idea may have even come from leveraging that technology that Elon's working on in a chip that can then control devices. Except this is the other way around, in that the chip was controlling the biology rather than connecting a brain to devices. It was connecting a gap in the biology, but it was also connecting to the brain as well. So there's a lot of similarities in there, except it was used in a different thematic sense. Also, things like police drones. I just did a quick Google before we started talking, and people also ask under Google, do US police use drones? According to the most recent tally on the Atlas of Surveillance, a project of EFF and the University of Nevada, at least 1,172 police departments nationwide are using drones. And over time, we can expect more law enforcement agencies to deploy them. So it's already happening. They're already using drones, and it's just going to become more prevalent.
They got drone planes after all.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you saw it was just everywhere in that movie. The little drone plane, the little drones flying around with the little flashy lights, which also seem to be particularly useless, except to tell the bad guys that they've been sprung and they should run away now, because they didn't do any stopping. They didn't have tasers on them or anything to stop people. But
deliveries with drones too.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd like the police drone to deliver me a pizza, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No, they only deliver donuts in coffee.
I'm just reading what Angelus is shot to me here. Yes, I do think that the chip was talking to the rest of his body, because it was linking through the nerves to control his actions, and by talking, I mean, the way our brain talks to our body is through our nervous system. It was linking the nervous system, so it was basically doing everything that the brain could do anyway. It could activate glands, it could move muscles, it could transmit pain signals. It was doing all the nervous system
So,
stuff.
do you think it, for lack of a better term, do you think it bunny hopped the part of the spinal cord, if you will, where it was severed?
It was
and then
bridging.
basically use the rest of the nervous system to like move his legs one foot after the other, to like sidestep and twist and turn and whatnot.
It was an intelligent bridge, but it was bridging in both directions. So it was actually accessing his eyes and ears and all those other senses that were in the non-affected part of his body. So it could link, it could draw in both directions, which I thought was quite interesting. I mean, nominally the brain gets all the information. It doesn't sort of, the nerves connecting down shouldn't then be connecting up as well, because that's not how the brain works. The brain is the center, but this thing was also a center. So somehow it was getting signals that were going to the brain and pulling them down to it as well. I don't know how it would have worked, but it was an interesting methodology.
Like you're in a dick stem, I cannot get born, and the stem goes whoosh. Everybody thought about that, but nobody said it.
Stem also has a Viagra function, I'm sure, and a stamina function.
But yeah, Giancarlo is right in a point where he was the translating device between what Gray's will was and the actual action. So it's kind of interesting to see. But if you think about it, Gray wanted to move his arm. He would actually signal to Stem, and then Stem would move it for him. And I found that to be really clever on the story. You know, when he walks, when he moves a finger, those are all commands that he sent to Stem, and Stem had to execute them. But I get it.
Stem executed. Target meat.
Taking it a step further. And when he drew that tattoo or whatever it was, he says, "I could draw it for you, and then draw it, or I could cut him up so we could question him. You can look away, and I'll do it for you." So yeah, it definitely was an interesting. Like again, Maxi mentioned it earlier about like a new twist about the movie brought into a used trope that was done well.
Yeah.
I think for the couple of flaws that it had, it really was executed quite well, especially for the price. It was value.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Ray, I interrupted. So go ahead.
That's all right. Yeah, the only other technology that I was going to point to is self-driving cars, which Google and Elon are working on at the moment. But the concern with self-driving cars is them being hacked, and we've seen multiple times in this movie that the self-driving cars are hacked. So,
I think it will be a reality on a future where this is a mainstream way of conduction.
Well, the technologically nervous will watch this movie and go, "I'll just drive myself, thanks."
Well,
that would be the sensible way to go.
Wait.
Well, whatever new technologies are developed, there's always a possibility for them to be used for not for good. Put it that way, for things that are not generally considered good. So I mean, everything's a double-edged sword, and we just have to accept that no matter how hard you try to make something safe, it can be made unsafe. And that's just life. Life is not safe.
Everything that is
Yeah.
done can be done for a great good or for a great evil.
Mhm. If only he'd use his powers for good. If he knew what good was.
With greater power comes greater responsibility.
With
and greater
grey.
chuckles.
Oh, sorry, that was the wrong movie.
And great boldness.
Did you say greater or grey?
Great boldness.
Grey power.
Yeah, because he got,
Grey.
just because he got upgraded. That's why.
Mm.
Sorry,
Oh,
Angelus.
love-
I just.
Upgraded. Now you're bold.
Hey, I welcome the dad jokes. The more stupid, the more insane and not funny it is, the funnier it is.
Well, I'm done now. I'm just trying not to say it so that Gene Kelly will make it into a sex comment. I can't even say I'm finished. It just doesn't work. I'm screwed here. So everything I say, Gene Kelly can turn into a sex joke.
Well,
Yeah,
what's
no.
that?
He doesn't have his little notes for this
Yeah.
episode, so we at least we're safe in that aspect of it.
No, yeah,
He'd
you
probably
just gotta
go-
hear me
he-
say
he-
it every time.
He'd probably go, "That's what she," and then disappear.
I might be a little delay in bringing him back.
I'm gonna put a button in the roadcaster. Just put a button in the roadcaster. Click. That's what you said.
Oh wow! So this was a great episode. I really like conversations like this one. When we can get really deep into the topic.
And I get
And
really deep
if
into the
you're
connection
listening,
too.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Giancarlo disconnecting often.
yeah. That's the funniest part of the episode.
Yeah, I'm the dynamic part of the group, coming in and out.
Up and down like the Assyrian bloody empire.
So if you like, to see Giancarlo's disappearing act, it is pure magic. This episode would release a month after it's released on audio format on YouTube. So if you guys are not familiar by now, we are releasing all these episodes for everyone on season 2 in our YouTube channel a month after. So if you want to see Angelus, because you go to Radio Chaos and you don't see his face, then just wait for the release date, and Science Fiction Random will show you Angelus in his glory and all his dad jokes.
So listen to the pod first because we need the
Bada boom.
the listens.
Bada boom, Ray. Bada boom.
Awesome. I guess, Angelus, is there anything you want to tell our audience about, where they can, if you have anything that you're doing that you want to make them aware of, if they want to.
Your seller, your cash app, so they can send you money.
You might want to mention the Alita live stream, Angelus.
Something that Ray probably hasn't already mentioned, but this is something that I learned from a leader, and I guess it's just reinforced by seeing you guys and Jesse that I shouted out earlier from Sudden But Inevitable and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Is by all means let word of mouth, let critics, and let every and all influences, like outside forces, influence you, but don't let them make your decision.
Yes.
Much like Robert, yes, he didn't like certain aspects of the movie, but that didn't stop him from making him watch it. Make sure that you are the one making the final decision on whether you watch a movie or not. And yeah, I mean, if hearing this show has piked your interest in the movie, then by all means give it a shot. And just to even give you guys a shout out, if the way that we've communicated and bantered with the audience and amongst ourselves is something that you enjoyed hearing, then yeah, just definitely check out their other episodes. like I mentioned earlier, it's something that, depending on what I'm doing, I can quite often play these podcasts as a bit of a radio or background noise as I'm driving or as I'm doing house chores, and yeah, like long after I'm finishing them, I can sit down and like listen to it like I would music. It's I love it, and again, it all culminated from that one moment that I chose to watch a leader, but like it just amazes me that had I not made that decision of making my own decision rather than just like believing the critics or whatever the case may be, like I would have met Maxi, and then through Maxi I would have met you guys, and through you guys I would have met Jesse, and like the daisy chain just keeps on going. So yeah, don't make sure that you make the final decision, because you never know that like what's like further down the track.
Yeah, definitely. So
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and yeah, another thing again that a leader encouraged me to do is the live stream. I've heard of the term, never experienced it, never watched it, never had anything to do with it until I watched a leader and I met like-minded people like Maxi. And yeah, now I'm on live streams, podcasts, the main one being the leader live stream that we have every Sunday for down under.
No,
And
Saturday for Down Under, Friday for US. You said the Elita live stream, which is your earlier one.
Oh yeah, see,
Are
the
you guys
time
an
zone is
Elita Army?
Somebody's going to be on the ball.
yeah, so I do that as a hobby, and because I love that so much, that's when Maxi sort of invited me to come on as a mainstay for Radio Chaos, which is, I'm sure that he's mentioned quite a few times. That's on the Saturday for the US and Sunday. I'm just going to leave it there because my brain's fried when it comes to time zones. So yeah, and like appearing on podcasts and stuff like this, like I now have desires to like eventually, not just come back here, but join other podcasts that I've met through you guys, and like just discuss stuff that we love, because I'm sure you might have heard of us crazy leader fans, but we do like other things.
Yeah, we love
Excuse
the fandom, and all the positive things you can talk about in IP. So awesome. So
Yep.
if you're listening to the show, now you know where to get more of Angelus in your life. So, and Ray. So just if you haven't listened, if you haven't watched the live stream, I strongly recommend it. Even if you're not an Alita fan, if you never heard of Alita, this might turn you. But especially if you're an Alita fan, I do recommend you go into and watch the live stream. And also, I like to say, if you really like what we are doing, you notice that we don't typically ask for you to support us, although we don't mind it. But we have other ways, because I know how life is. We are, we don't necessarily have like a buck to share or stuff like that, and we don't like asking for any of that. But if you like what we do and you want to support us, you can really do that by, you can go and review us. You can go and rate us in any platform that you choose to use. That's another great thing about podcasts, is that you can listen to your favorite podcast in whichever way you choose to follow us. Another way that we would like your support is we do have a store where we're adding different you can get your shirts, and we have different images that we use for our show, and you can get a mug, you can get a t-shirt, you can get in, and just not necessarily for the actual shirt, because we technically don't make any money out of that, but just a way where you can share publicly your love for our show. And you could, you can help us that way. You can help our show by, and if you do choose to review us in whichever platform you like, send us a screenshot via Twitter, and you could be on our next episode. So, anything else before we close?
I'm good.
Awesome.
I'm good.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh.
He got through the whole thing without dropping off.
That's all, folks.
Impressive.
Awesome. So, thank you everybody for listening to our show, and I really hope to see you next time.
No hope is a fact of science.